Alright, I kind of feel like I'm recording. Look, the camera says we've got 19 minutes, thereabouts, of playtime. Look, I will try to keep this video fairly succinct. I've uploaded about 3 or 4 on this topic of optimization specifically for one VR title. And it's getting a little bit fatiguing with the redoing of them and the redoing of them. And it quite simply was I did a perfect video and one of the overlays wasn't up. And whilst I was voice narrating through those steps, some people seem to get a bit upset and they'd demand extra videos or something. So just preempting, right? You can't please everybody. The reason there's this long lead in is that the people that are really frustrated and really angry, right? That might be you, and apologies if I'm not catering to you. But I personally don't need feedback flat from those people. So you could say, oh, look, you've started really amateur hour here, really B grade. Your video's not for everyone, right? Well, if you're feeling that way, right, just acknowledge that somebody else out there has put in some effort and some time. And it's not that I need acknowledgement, but the last thing I need is negativity, right? My partner, my family have to engage with me as a human being after a day of potentially doing support. And I stopped supporting Windows PCs because of the way the Windows platform made me feel constantly frustrated because of constant rollouts and very anti-consumer moves. Right, I'll always try to put the boot in on Microsoft, macro shaft, because of 3+ decades of servicing their products and intentional anti-consumer movements that wastes everybody's time. So I don't want to waste anybody's time. I had done succinct videos. Sometimes the camera wasn't recording, other times the battery ran out, other times, for whatever reasons, the universe has put off this video until now. So why the long lead in? Well, because I don't expect everything's about to come together. I'm just getting all my vetting over and done with first, so that when I do the second video, and I don't want to do a long lead in, I just jump straight in and get it done, right? So most people will have skipped forward until they've seen some screen movement. So I'm going to put some screen movement in now. I am talking right over the camera. I'm probably peaking right up at peak. Memory, right? So it's fairly succinct. Fairly neat Windows build. My desktop's sitting there. It's been up for a little while actually. It probably says on that first screen. What have we got? Seconds, minutes, hours. No, seconds, minutes. Oh, sure. Yeah, okay. 20 hours. Well, it's had a few reboots. I'm surprised about the 20 hour mark. I'm sure I was playing with overclocking yesterday and that required crashing Windows. Regarding my CPU speed, it's not a good overclock. It's just one of the free ones you get with the system, and therefore all the speed stepping's still in place. That it's actually quite gentle on my power bill. The only reason I'm doing some housekeeping here is that we need to qualify a few things. If you come in and see my settings running at medium, and there's a lot of people out there who are going to try and attack me saying, oh, you've been running the game perfectly apparently, and yet we come in and look at it and you're not really playing it. You haven't made lots of progress in the game to qualify that later in the game it's hard to run and these settings won't work. Right? Okay. These settings aren't meant for my machine to work later in the game. These settings are for other people to get up and running and have a smooth play experience, right? I've been running around with a lot higher settings than my machine is currently run at, and I was enjoying the game thoroughly. A lot. But it is true, I prefer playing on the PlayStation console just because as a PC tech, I just put it on, turn it on, I'm playing it within 30 seconds guaranteed every time, unless my controllers aren't charged. So regarding PC troubleshooting, this is a machine that's more than 10 years old. Okay, I've bought every part in this machine second-hand. The total cost of this build is about that of double a PlayStation 5 Pro. Everyone out there saying a PlayStation 5 Pro is an exceptional value for money, they have no idea what they're talking about. In fairness, the power supply in my computer here is worth more than a PlayStation base model. And it allows me to power monitor and it allows me to learn lots of things. And I always generally set my machine to consume the same amount of power as a PlayStation, just for fair comparison's sake, which actually means I've lent on a perfect video card, which sips power, arguably. We're not going to see that though. If I could just bring up in the middle of the screen, you'll actually see, if I just right click on the desktop, right? See how there's no AMD heading at the top there? That basically means I'm not running a full fat driver package. I've got no option for overclocking the video card or doing anything particularly clever. which would be the normal way of doing things. I've written guides for using Black Myth Wukong, which is an Unreal Engine 5 title, and using it to tune for Unreal Engine 5. So you don't have to constantly have your VR headset on and crashing out if you're pushing your card to the absolute max. But yeah, at the moment, I'm not doing anything smart with regards to overclocking or anything. But I just wanted to address the elephant in the room, which is the CPU here, which I used to run at about 4.8 gigahertz. And then when I was first playing Alien Rogue Incursion, I found that I wasn't needing above about 4.6 gigahertz on a machine that's about 7 generations under the minimum, right? We need to qualify this. This machine being 10 years old, right? Those numbers might sound impressive, like 4.6 gigahertz, but there's a little thing called instructions per clock that goes up with every new iteration of chipset. It's usually worth about 5%, sometimes it's worth a bit more than that, like 10%. But if there's 7 generations of chipsets, right, it's fair to say that's a gigahertz worth of speed that I need to punch high. So if the game... So basically my 4.6 gigahertz probably is equivalent to 3.5 gigahertz on a more modern architecture. And I'm going to be missing out on certain things like buses on the main board that might increase drive performance, etc. Some drive formats alleviate certain needs to push data through all the buses on the machine. They can take away some of the need on the CPU to be hit so hard. So it's fair to say this is a worst case scenario. Now, yes, my video card might be a little bit above laptop users out there with cards that aren't 4 years old like mine, but the CPU is going to be choking my system, undoubtedly, which means, yeah, my GPU is not fully pegged out. But it's neither here nor there. This is more just a proof of concept video to show this game can work smoothly. I spent all my time initially just running with medium settings and going for reprojection free, and that was where I've clocked all my hours up until this week, where I've actually started playing with graphical settings, and that was when I started to experience, I guess, what other people were saying, which was really poor quality textures in place. And many hours of game testing showed me that there's very hostile settings with regards to possibly Steam as a front end that you could say auto-configures for different hardware to what I'm using, right? Different headsets. It uses rules of thumb for older headsets, no doubt, and possibly Fresnel lenses versus my lens. Oh, I might have that back to front. My lenses are further from the screen, of the OLED screen inside of the headwear, which means the amount of distortion towards the edge of the frame is less. And there's a huge field of view, and to be honest, I'm never looking at the edge of the frame. So I set my pixels per eye resolution down a lot closer to native, and I do that because it nets me about 30% more frame time, which allows me to turn my settings up a lot higher. Everyone needs to learn their machine. The reason for this long lead-in is that don't just look at my settings and go, well, his CPU's faster than mine, I'm not running at 4.6 gigahertz. It's like, no, trust me, my CPU is going to be a holdback that nobody else who's running this game is using. This is literally a 10-year-old CPU. It's outdated. It's so far below minimum spec, it's not funny. And it holds back the rest of the rig because of that. So there's no need to compare yours versus mine. This isn't a bragging rights thing. This isn't a I'm better than you or I can make stuff work on ancient hardware type run. This is just the game can run smooth, but there's a lot of hostilities, and some of it comes down to just understanding that Unreal Engine doesn't render obvious polygons to the screen, right? The reason we've always needed to go super high res to make games look prettier is because that's when we get rid of jaggies or pixel edges. We don't see obvious triangles, right? Textures can look better, etc. That's not the case with Unreal Engine. And Unreal Engine 5 on all games is running at a lower res because there's 100,000 times more polygons, arguably at a scene. And that means that objects can be round, even at lower resolution, right? So we need to bring that knowledge to the virtual reality space. We need, when we're looking at this game, to understand that setting the resolution lower might not affect the performance so much. So I'm going to give some basic settings to get us up and running. I really want people to then consider this game running smoothly. What I found is reprojection free. I was in a world where the assets were being culled or dropped down to keep the frame rate high. As soon as I went into reprojection territory, which is how the game's been built from the ground up, it was a better experience. Now, I know this because I kept playing it on PlayStation in reprojection mode, something I've always avoided on every other title, and the game's never caused me any issues. I've always found it really smooth, really fast, and really enjoyable. And so when I took that logic to the PC space, I found that my play sessions went up by a factor of 4 times the length, because running at 120 hertz rather than 90 hertz must have been the feedback that was just felt faster, and it was just a smoother, nicer experience. So some of this guide might only be relevant to PSVR2 headwear on PC, but a lot of it is just a tweaking guide for getting up and running. Anyway, let's talk, more do, right? Half our time gone, nothing covered, I get it. So, just going to run. Right, so PSVR, let's. Okay, so a couple of things with the PSVR front end. Oop. Okay. So, I wanted to change some settings. Tell you what, let's find Oh, that's right, I wanted to do this one. Excellent. This is where my other video fell apart, because I was looking at in-game menu stuff at this stage that just wasn't turning up in the video. Okay. Okay, so it's a bit weird here. What I might do is try and walk to the back of the room. I've got a trackball, I might go the rest of my leg. It's all a bit weird for me. Right, so if I go menu. Right, what I want to take people through here is, oh no, I don't need the trackball, excellent. Okay, so we want to look at some Steam settings. So under video settings, motion smoothing has to be off where you get the memory leak, right? If you don't see that option there, you might be using a different renderer, that's fine. Custom resolution multiplier, as you can see, it changes it. Oh, it's so frustrating. No, I'm sure that's the same as I had yesterday. But my default setting was 3300 by 3000. That is such an over render. It's 10 megapixels per eye. I was losing about a third of, I gained an extra 4 milliseconds of frame time back by dropping that closer to native. And I don't see pin cushioning at the edge of my screen. It might be a large field of view, I don't know. But I assure you that the improved render to screen by setting the game settings up and having that extra 4 milliseconds of headroom is just a better performing game. Right, so the one that we really need to look at here is, I keep trying to go with override world scale, but it turns that off in between boots, right? You can pretty much guarantee that's a large part of it. Okay, lock application frame rate to 60. This was the big one yesterday after 4 hours of performance tuning. Dropping that from 120 down to 60 forced it into repro mode and stopped the game trying to cull assets to try to maintain 120. That there is the essential setting, right? Essential for clawing back proper quality graphics in your game, right? So I'm going to encourage people to come into their Steam settings. You can go video settings, you can come down and you go lock application there, right? So if we look at, normally at the top there is the, yep, so there's my 120, that's the way it should be. Now I think we've covered everything on this screen. Now let's come over to the game. Okay, so for me, these settings really got me out of trouble. I'm running at the moment with pixel density 1. Play to suit, I actually found at 0.8 I wasn't getting any jaggies in the world, either on the fence or on the grills in here or in the game world. And it seems to bypass some of the graphical effects that come with TSR mode, the little blue flashes. But at the moment I'm just kicking around with a lot of settings on medium, so I've actually cranked that back up. Right, anti-aliasing mode has to basically be TAA. You don't actually need the anti-aliasing quality here. Even if it says off, the anti-aliasing is on. It's basically the low setting is my guess. If you've got TAA there and it says off, it is on. Now I've cranked that up to epic just because I can get away with it, and I like no jaggies in the game. But you'll see that I'm actually running things at a low res. Oh, that's what I missed. In the video settings, on a per game basis, Steam's robbing me of this. It's in the Steam frame. Oh my lord, where is it? Ah! It's so vital. Okay, it was over here. It's under a setting over here. VR settings, maybe. You can lock. Oh, in the application. Oh, yeah, the config. Right. So don't exit game. There. You can go properties. And here, right? Game resolution. So two things. Enable Steam overlay while in the game. Lose that. That's up to 6 gig of VRAM you can get back straight away if it's rendering a crazy world. Or it's certainly, I would turn that off. Game resolution, custom it. Don't let it run at default because it'll change your per boot settings. I actually found that I had everything set at Epic, it was running great. And I started again, and not everything. I had most things on high with about 4 or 5 things on Epic, and it ran perfectly. And then the next time I booted, it had changed the game resolution and destroyed the experience. So set that, and again, working off the basis of how Unreal Engine works, you can set that quite low. Right now, I just go set resolution for internal and external display to make it the same. Right, those settings there allow us now to run the game with the in-game settings set how you like. And I spent 4 hours just playing with resolution, basically, and trying to get rid of the jaggies in the game and keeping the high-res assets rendering out to the edge of the screen. So under graphics, right, one, TAA, I mean, I've got a few things on Epic because that suits me. These were all mostly on high. I need anything that leans on the CPU, like post-processing, to potentially be down lower. That being said, I have run everything on highs, and using this mode, it ran really well. But just for this guide, I want people to set things a little bit more comfortably. I actually had dynamic resolution off completely. I've left that on for performance headroom later in the game, right? So I'll turn that off now. And, right, load game and good on. So, there we go. Now what I found with this was that all the assets stayed really high quality. And I could see things at a distance and it wasn't going to alias at edges, it just worked. And that was even with dynamic resolution on. It wasn't working too hard. Now I'm hoping my frame rate bar is up on the screen, it isn't. Okay. So for a brief moment coming in I had a couple of reds, but basically it's just going to sit in perfect reprojection territory. I should just run outside because obviously we've got limited time. But all the physics run really well. I've turned my torch on to create a nightmare scenario. And I mean the game is just fantastic. It really is. All the settings now look the way they should. The world has all the nice lighting, although again, crank your settings to suit. Sorry if I'm not talking loud now and I'm facing away from the mic. I've turned my light off so it's the PSVR is tracking well shot in the room. But as you can see, the game world looks amazing. If you see any edges on the screen, it's because it's at a low res, but when you're rendering to 2 eyes, the offset images stacked on top of each other looks really good. If anyone's ever seen a Nintendo 3DS and how they look really low res, but if you put it in 3D mode, jaggies just disappear. That's the nature of how 3D works. So don't be afraid if your share screen looks a little bit jaggy. What you'll find in the game world is you just don't see a pixel. You don't see edges. And so this here is with all the textures set high, all the graphics set high, so little visual noise. Everything just looks amazing, everything's interacting with each other. Even down here in the shed, there's no aliasing. It has a little bit there where it's not sure of the light and how to render it across the surface. That is because the world is essentially at a lower resolution. But once you've got your performance where you want, I mean I'm sitting on 8.5 millisecond frame times, 8.4. I've got a lot of headroom. So, I mean this is fantastic. If I was trying to render at 120, reprojection free, I'm basically there now. So I can crank a lot of settings if I want, but I don't have to. And the game's just fantastic. All the high-res settings are in. Okay, that there is to do with the current build, I believe, where the textures there kick in. But that's just the performance tuning that the studio just keeps doing with each given build. So, I mean, the game is just fantastic. Just a little bit of tuning and we're up and running, right? So, as you'll see, in terms of edges, right, there just isn't any. Everything's looking fantastic. You'll see in a second, if we haven't run out of recording time, I imagine we have, that like just the physics on all the pipes here, everything just looks amazing, right? So just coming at this game, knowing it's Unreal Engine, slightly different ways to tune it, SteamVR front end has a few settings that just need to be on top of. Set your in-game settings to like 1400 or